Boom. Guys, welcome to the CrossFit Edgehill Community Podcast, where we meet and get to really know more about our coaches, our CrossFitters in our community, where we create an avenue for the above to share their stories and an avenue for our CrossFitters to learn more about locally owned businesses and the characters behind them. I'm your host, Dr. Greg Skelly. I'm the CEO of CrossFit Edgehill, and I've spent much of the last 10 years as the head coach and head workout programmer at CrossFit Edgehill. I'm joined by my good friend and co-host for the day, Dallas Amsden, who will be interviewing us and picking our brains on the topic of the day. Also joined by CrossFit Edgehill coach and current lead workout programmer, Shawn Crocker. Hey guys, good afternoon.
Hey.
Welcome to the show. Dallas, I'll let you kind of take it over from here.
Sure. Well, I'm super excited to be a part of this with you guys, and I know throughout the podcast you're going to be covering different elements of CrossFit itself, so I'm really excited about that. I'm just going to say that I have now just hit or just passed my 1-year mark at CrossFit Edwardsville, and
Nice. Awesome,
and I'm starting to be able to do some workouts RX as prescribed, but I'm still doing some of the workouts with scaling, depending on the movements and whether or not I can't do muscle ups yet. But we won't talk too much about that. But we are going to talk about this idea of scaling today, RX versus scaling. So, Shawn, I'll toss this first question at you. What is workout scaling?
What is workout scaling? So just kind of the ability or opportunity to adjust specific movements, weights, loads to fit your current abilities. Kind of what you are capable of doing, and that's again, we're going to get into it. It's going to kind of really depend on the technicality, the loading, the rep scheme, the time domains, kind of all of that stuff kind of taken into consideration. And it's something that I know a lot of CrossFitters struggle with and being able to do appropriately. So it's exciting for me to be able to kind of dive a little deeper into and kind of give people the opportunity to see it from my perspective as well as Coach G's perspective.
I think one of the things that's kind of important about that is the fact that it allows people at every level of fitness, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so the beginners to the more advanced, scaling allows you an opportunity to step in, because I know that one of the things that kept me away from CrossFit for a few years were the CrossFit Games and seeing what these monsters were doing, and I'm like, I have to get in shape to go do a CrossFit workout versus actually, G, I'm going to toss this at you. When I first stepped in, scaling was one of the first conversations we had, because I said to you, and I don't think I can do any of these movements. And that's when you kind of introduced us to the idea of scaling. So talk about that a little bit, G. What was the inspiration specifically for this conversation today?
So Coach Shawn actually had the inspiration that we should have a conversation about this. And to take a quick step back, I think it's important. We might probably have some people on this podcast that aren't on the up and up with the CrossFit lingo. So I like to give my own take on what scaling is as well.
Sure.
So scaling is our CrossFit-y word for adjusting the exercises, the rep ranges, the movements, the workouts to be individualized and tailored for what Dallas wants to get from this workout, what Shawn wants to get from this workout. So, synonyms might include modifications or adjustments of the workout, but in CrossFit world, we specifically call it scaling workouts, and that comes with a lot of connotations, which is why I think it's so important for us to address this in this forum. Maybe we can destroy some of the misconceptions and give people a better idea. Why do you scale? How do you scale? And why is it not a bad thing to scale a workout?
Yeah, that's good. So let's get into the why. So what would be some of the reasons? Now we're going to get into misconceptions here in just a few minutes, but what would be some of the reasons, and actually, Shawn, I'll toss this at you, that someone would need to scale something? Obviously, I talked about my own limitations, but what would be some other reasons someone would need to scale?
Yeah, I think that's a good start. current ability, right? I mean, you brought up like not being able to do a muscle up. So you look at kind of like the higher skill gymnastics movements are a good example, like handstand walking, handstand push-ups, muscle ups being a great example. We're obviously always trying to get better. Like no one's going to CrossFit to get worse at anything, which, you can't, like day one CrossFitter is not going to be able to probably do a muscle up. There's exceptions, right?
Yeah.
But making sure that whatever the workout that is programmed for the day is able to fit kind of your current abilities. And scaling goes kind of both ways. Like far too often we look at it as scaling is kind of reducing. But you brought up like games athletes, like those higher caliber, like sanctional level athletes need to scale up too. So there's that aspect. It's lesser known and lesser kind of talked about and seen, but that is an example of scaling as well. But also you look at like loading, right? So like we had a programming podcast last that we talked about kind of developing how the workouts and how we kind of have this avatar in mind. It's just kind of like CrossFit's always kind of had this like prescribed nature to it. So like when I'm writing a workout, I'm writing it for like, let's say Dallas Amsden. But Greg Skelly is not going to be able to do maybe the same loading, right? Maybe Dallas is a little stronger at something, but Greg has better gymnastic skills. So how do we make this kind of same workout affect both of these people in the exact same way? I think that's kind of a good way to kind of start looking at it as far as scaling goes.
I would like to point out here that GSkell can beat me in just about everything, but I believe I outlifted you last week in the back squat.
It wasn't close either. It wasn't even close.
Yeah, and I actually got to go home and tell my wife that. So that was kind of
yeah. The first workout I ever beat Greg in was pistols and wall balls, and I still hold that one pretty near me.
Yeah, it will not be the last time. I'm sure that for both of you guys.
Well, it was one of those things too where I finished mine and you were getting ready for your last set, and I looked over and I went, I'll be doggone, I'm going to beat him. That's his last set.
Yeah,
I can't say that about anything except for that one time.
Yeah, it wasn't close. Let's put it that way. Like you completely outlifted me on this back squat test we did. But getting to the scaling idea.
Yeah.
What I like about this is you're going to get two, I think, pretty different perspectives on scaling from me and Shawn. I look at scaling like it's a tool for achieving what the individual wants to get from the workout. More specifically, pretty much anybody that comes to CrossFit Edwardsville, they're here because they either want to look better, they want to feel better, or they want to improve their performance in something. They want to look better, feel better, or improve their performance in something. And depending on what the person's desired outcome is, we scale a workout up, down, left, or right to help them get to that end goal faster. Or if there's a common stimulus, like if Shawn has, all right, I want everybody to improve their pulling from the floor strength.
Yeah.
How do we adjust the loads, the rep ranges, so that it achieves that goal for everybody in the room? Given that Dallas is stronger than me, what does it look like for him? What does it look like for me? It's the individualization of the stimulus, so we all get the same thing. So
I think that's good. One of the things you just said there, and I'm going to reiterate it, is there's kind of three goals there: look better, feel better, improve performance. And also, I know one of the mantras that we use at CrossFit Edwardsville is that we would move with excellence. Mm-hmm. And so if you ever get to the point, and we're going to talk about misconceptions here in just a second, but if we ever get to the point where we're not moving well, we're increasing the possibility of injury, we're doing something like that if we're trying to go above and beyond our current capacity. Not that we shouldn't push it, right? But going above and beyond that current capacity, that's where I think scaling is important. So Shawn, I'm going to toss a question here at you first, and then we'll throw it back at G. What do you consider some of the common misconceptions around scaling to be?
I think probably the best way to kind of wrap this all up is RX or die, that kind of mentality that you see. I mean, day in and day out. Like, I've fallen victim to it plenty of times. And I think that that's a really kind of dangerous approach to it. Again, kind of like every workout has a desired stimulus, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
There's always kind of a desired kind of finishing time, or if it's an AMRAP, kind of rounds and reps. Like, how do we take this piece that's in front of us and adjust it so that we are pushing our limits, improving whatever it is that we're kind of aiming to improve, whether it's kind of our aerobic capacity or our strength or transition. I mean, there's an infinite amount of things that we can be looking to improve upon. But how do we take kind of what is written on the board and adjust it to kind of what we are able to do? So I think kind of that misconception of like, I'm not a good athlete or I'm not a good CrossFitter because I'm not constantly doing RX.
Yeah.
I think that needs to go away. Like, I remember CrossFit making shirts that said like scaling is not a crime. And I think that that's kind of probably one of the best messages that I've seen CrossFit put out since Pukey the Clown.
Remember him?
Back
in the day?
Oh yeah.
Explain who that is for people who don't know. Gee, who is Pukey the Clown?
Pukey the Clown was the original CrossFit mascot. He's a clown doubled over, vomiting on the floor, supposed to represent how hardcore and intense we are as exercisers, that this insane looking clown vomiting all over himself on the floor would represent us. Fortunately, I think that at headquarters, they've thought better of this.
Yeah.
And so Pukey the Clown has kind of taken he's fallen into the background as a memory for original gangsters like me.
I feel like we should find him somewhere and just show an image of him, because now he was different than, I think my first, when I first learned about CrossFit, I actually learned about Rhabdo.
Yeah.
Dr. Rhabdo.
And so was he the secondary mascot behind Pukey?
Probably
Yeah,
was.
he was very short-lived.
Yeah, I'm sure it's not good PR to have people bleeding from their kidneys, which I would say doesn't happen. I mean, I don't think that really occurs, and I think that's one of the things with scaling that's good. So G, we asked Shawn that question. I'm going to ask you now. What are some scaling misconceptions that you've heard or that you have had to confront over the years?
Absolutely. So right off the bat, I want to go ahead and throw some terminology out there. There's, in CrossFit space, scaled is often associated with being a beginner level of an exercise. RX is associated with being in an intermediate level of an exercise. And RX plus is associated with being an advanced level of the exercise. So if we say as RX in this conversation, we're talking about as prescribed, like the RX of a prescription.
Yeah.
What was the workout prescription? And RX plus, the advanced, scaled. And with that, I think that scaled has a stigma, a negative stigma associated with it. Shawn alluded to this earlier, that scaled is less than. But I think the more appropriate way of looking at it is that scaled, like scaling, is adjusting the workout in any direction to make it the right workout for you. And if that means you're doing a workout that's different than RX, fantastic. In fact, like for a lot of the gung-ho competitive CrossFitters, it's probably healthier and safer for them, depending on what their goals are, healthier and safer for them to be scaling a workout. I think there's a misconception that scaling is inherently a bad thing or a negative thing. So that's one. And I think that, by the way, this all came up because for the same reason that you are apprehensive about CrossFit, Dallas, there is a widespread perception that CrossFit is purely a sport. And in order to be a participant in that sport, you have to be RX or beyond. Otherwise, you didn't get to play on the playing field, generally speaking.
Right.
So it's sort of like RX becomes associated with being the club of kids that have it. Like there's haves and have-nots in CrossFit. And if you're RX, you're in the in club. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And this is, I mean, it's really unfortunate that that's the case, because for the vast majority of people, 95% of people that come to CrossFit, it's not a sport for them. it's an avenue to look great, to feel great, and be able to do really cool stuff in life.
Yeah.
The sport aspect is the minority of it. So I know that in our gym, like this misconception, I think it's true for every CrossFit gym. They deal with this to an extent. I'm excited though that I think this podcast is going to, I guess, demystify and illuminate the subject.
Sure. And I think too, one of the things I would say to that is with the idea of scaling, and again, something I said earlier was you can join at any level.
Mm-hmm.
You can come and be a part of CrossFit, and it doesn't matter. You're challenging yourself every day. And like yesterday, we did a Metcon, metabolic conditioning, for those who don't know, but we did a Metcon workout that I was actually able to RX because like, hey, I know how to do all these movements. Today I could not. So because of the weight of one of the movements. So it definitely is one of those things where sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. And I'm going to jump forward to that question. Actually, we've got quite a few questions that we want to talk about, but Shawn, what if I can RX some things and have to scale others? How does that work? And how do I determine that? Maybe.
I mean, it's a good question. Like, it kind of really depends on, I guess, your ability level. Like, I know when I'm usually writing programming, I kind of, when we're talking about loading specific, I kind of have that like on the forethought of my mind because you brought up today's or the workout you did where the loading was maybe a little heavier than you were comfortable with. Generally speaking, like there's always either like a percentage of your 1 rep max, right? Like how much weight you can lift one time.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of as a guideline, I think a lot of it's going to be based off of feel. So like the workout you're describing, for example, like I'm looking for people to be able to do this, the prescribed amount of reps in this many sets or less.
Yeah. So just to tell everybody, I mean, specifically to let you know what that example was, there were 30 reps of a particular barbell movement, shoulder to overhead. And what Shawn was wanting from everybody was he wanted us to get it in less than 4 sets. So you wanted to go 8 to 10 reps per set. So your load or the amount of weight on the bar kind of depended that. But G, what about you, man? What would you say to that question of having to scale some things and having to RX? I think Shawn gave a pretty good answer there, but what would you add to that question?
If you have to scale some things and RX, you're able to RX some things, that is completely normal, healthy, even desirable. It's a sign that you are adapting your approach to the program, like probably appropriately. The shortest answer I can give, if you're not sure, ask your coach. So Coach Shawn, me, Coach Jake, the rest of the team, like literally we are there. It's our business to know what you want to get out of the workout and then know how to mold the clay so that it creates the right kind of pottery for you.
Sure. There's an interesting thing to that, though, and specifically, and maybe this isn't the right question to ask, but I remember, Shawn, you may remember this. It was during the Open this last year, and I had signed up for the Open, had the app, was putting my scores in. People who the kind of going theory, I guess, was if you did an open workout at RX, even if you got 1 rep at RX, you still scored higher globally than anyone who scaled.
Right.
Yeah. Was kind of the myth about it. So Shawn, there was one particular workup that included ring muscle ups. And we were setting up, and I decided to go RX because I could do everything else RX, and that was the last movement in the workout. And I'm setting my rings, and you just look over at me and you go, "What are you doing there, Dallas?" If I get these other 50 reps in the other movements, I'm going to be ahead globally against everyone else who scaled. And you were like, "You're not really going to try that, though, are you?" So I think there is this weird misconception, even with like the CrossFit Open and your scores globally and positionally like that. Now I'm a competitive person, so I just wanted to score higher, but there is still a little bit of a push for RX. So what would be the cautionary tale maybe of that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the open, like you're looking at, like we talked about CrossFit as a sport. Like the open is so unique in sports because it's kind of their everyday. It's the opportunity that us three have to compete against literally the best in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So the open, at least from my perspective, and G might have a different perspective on this, like the open is like game day. It's like our Super Bowl, right? From a sport specific side.
Mm-hmm.
So scaling in the open and scaling like in a day-to-day training environment, like those have two very, very different viewpoints for me. Like the open is your ability to test your fitness and where you're at. We get it once a year, weirdness aside from last year.
Sure.
So like, I don't know. I kind of bounce back and forth. Like the open is for everybody, and there are like RX and scale divisions. And like you said, I don't necessarily agree that you doing one wall ball at 20 pounds means you beat everybody else that completed that entire workout from the scaled prescription.
Sure.
But again, it's a sport thing. Like, how do you make this adjustable and applicable to hundreds of thousands of people?
Sure. Yeah.
Right. So I like the open, I kind of just put that aside. Like, well, I kind of think of like, we'll worry about that when it comes around in February. From scaling, like in a daily training perspective, is so much different because we are not, we shouldn't be anyways leaderboarding, like checking the leaderboard, seeing where we're at in relation to other people. Like obviously CrossFitters are competitive. We're wanting to kind of beat that next person, right? Like
it happens locally where we're looking down the road at other people there just in the box with us. I'm like, what's he doing? Where's he at in his reps? I mean, G, I see you do that all the time. You're watching your pace up against other people. I mean, what would you say to that question about what Shawn was just answering there with the competition versus the daily training?
So to be completely fair, I think the CrossFit Open definitely, what's what I'm looking for? It definitely encourages the idea that RX is better than scaled because you get one rep in the RX workout, you outscore everybody that did everything scaled.
Right.
So I think that definitely, there's a word I'm looking for, I can't quite place it, but it definitely encourages the idea onward. But the CrossFit Open is almost like an outlier situation for most of our CrossFit training year. Like the majority of the time, we're not training to be on a leaderboard.
Sure.
We're training to be able to have good energy all day and be able to keep up with our kids.
Right.
And not be exhausted by 3 p.m. But the CrossFit Open becomes this one time a year that all of us can become true competitors on a global leaderboard. So at that point, there's a shift in mindset. So scaling in the open, toward what Shawn is saying, is a different animal than scaling from day to day. Like I scaled yesterday's workout. It was the right thing for me to do.
Right.
And a great workout out of it. It was a better workout for me when I scaled it, given my abilities, what I wanted to get out of it. You know what I mean?
Sure.
If it was the open, I probably would have, died to get
sure
to get more points on the RX leaderboard.
Sure, of course.
It's a different kind of mind space.
So let's talk then about really for everybody listening and watching, kind of some of the appropriate ways to scale. And so we'll open this up to both of you to just kind of discuss it. But I know specifically, what are the appropriate ways to scale a gymnastics movement? Maybe then we can talk about weightlifting or loads, or then monostructural movements. So first, Shawn, I'm going to ask you, we've got 3 questions there. Appropriate way to adjust and scale gymnastics, and then weightlifting movements or loads, and then monostructural movements. If you wouldn't mind, Shawn, just kind of give us an overview of the definition of those 3 things.
Oh, yeah. So gymnastics is literally just moving your body without an external load, right? So like, we're on the tail end of the whole Jillian Michaels thing. If you guys don't know about that, she went on like this 10-minute rant about how we do these advanced gymnastics So it's going to be things like push-ups, sit-ups. Again, like probably the most advanced one we do is a muscle up, which is literally how you start a routine in gymnastics. Not that complicated. Weightlifting, again, is just any moving of external load. So it could be like Olympic weightlifting, powerlifting, just carrying something like a farmer's carry. And then monostructural is anything kind of repetitive. So like running, rowing, biking, swimming, jumping rope is generally considered monostructural.
Okay. Cool. So if gymnastics, let's use an example of one gymnastics movement and how we might adjust and scale in an appropriate way. So let's say a big one that we see fairly often is handstand push-ups.
Yeah, so that's actually the perfect one. That's the one my mind went to too.
Great.
I look at it kind of like I look at this on kind of three different levels. Like gymnastics, like if you have good capacity with handstand push-ups, generally speaking, like there's going to be a rep scheme that you should either be able to do unbroken or within a certain amount of sets. Okay, so let's look at that as like our RX or as prescribed. Removed from that, like a layer down. Let's say you have handstand push-ups, but you've got like maybe 3, 4, 5 unbroken, right? So your capacity is getting there. You're just not quite like well developed. I'll use.
Sure.
Then maybe we start reducing the reps, right? Because I mean, especially for gymnastics, like you can adjust this so many different ways, but a lot of the time, like you have to get comfortable with, and specifically with handstand push-ups, like just pressing upside down.
Yeah.
So maybe we start reducing the loading, or maybe we start reducing the range of motion if maybe the range of motion is an issue. Now, if we have kind of the ability to get upside down, but we don't quite have the strength, now we start looking at things like taking some of your body weight off of it, like using a box and kind of going into a pike position where you're upside down and stacked, but you're not pressing all of your body weight.
Sure.
Or maybe we start looking at like some kind of weightlifting, right? Like a dumbbell press. So we are still unstable and we are still adding load to the press, but maybe it's kind of more within the level that you're developing that strength in your shoulder blades and your capsules and your ability to just press weight, right?
Yeah.
And even then, like maybe you aren't super confident getting upside down. So we can even start looking at like wall walks or like handstand holds and just getting some time under tension. So we are starting to work towards the end of the goal being handstand push-ups.
Sure. Okay. I think that's a good thing to say. Getting you that particular example, getting you comfortable being upside down is a great step for some people who aren't used to going inverted like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And then like another way, like let's look at like I brought up like, kind of your more advanced athletes, like maybe we start adding in a deficit. So now you're pressing further, or we start going from kipping handstand push-ups to strict handstand push-ups.
Sure.
There's the other side of the coin where we're not scaling, down, but we're kind of going the other direction and making it more challenging.
Got it. Yeah. So Greg, to kind of throw that at you, G, let's talk about weightlifting movements, and we can maybe use one example. It sounds like, and Shawn, you can just give a yes here. It sounds like though it has to do with how much you can do, maybe unbroken. Would that be a good way to say that? Like what your level is? If you're hitting 10 handstand push-ups that are strict, then maybe it might start time to go with deficit or something like that. Like, how do you level up?
It depends on the workout. Like if we're looking at like 50 handstand push-ups for time, maybe it's just doing it in fewer sets, right?
Got it.
Or if we're looking at like a shorter range, like a shorter rep scheme, let's look like a workout of like 5 handstand push-ups, and you can knock those out all day long. Yeah, maybe we start adding in the deficit.
Got it.
Again, this is all like I hate to give the answer because it's so easily applicable to any question, but it depends.
It's a great answer. Yeah. So, Gene, you get to spin off of the idea of it depends, and let's talk specifically about weightlifting movements. And again, we know the big answer is it depends, but what's kind of the appropriate way that you see scaling and adjusting weightlifting movements? And maybe we can use an example of one.
I think this is great because I think that this highlights like 2 entirely valid perspectives on scaling. Like Shawn has this perspective where it's like there's a desired stimulus for the workout. How do I adjust the exercises to give that stimulus? The flip side of the coin could be the CrossFitter comes in and there's something that they want to achieve. How do I adapt the exercise to let them achieve what they want to achieve out of that workout? You know what I mean?
Yeah. So you had mentioned earlier that idea, look better, feel better, or improve performance is maybe a goal or something.
So then instead of there being one common stimulus across the entire room, now there might be 10 stimuli. Case in point, like we have a CrossFitter, Dunya. Her key objective, she wants to add more muscle to her frame.
Okay.
In the context of weightlifting, then there's real value for her being under tension, under a load for 40 seconds to 60 seconds continuous, doing reps for that extended period of time, right? It's more of a hypertrophy kind of stimulus. By contrast, if you have somebody in the room, they want to get stronger. They need to be explosive off the line for their high school football team. Then explosive singles, doubles, triples on a power clean, on a deadlift, that's really valuable for them.
Okay.
Because that the weightlifting stimulus then gives them that explosive burst, that completely anaerobic explosion off the line that they need. You know, by contrast, you might have, a CrossFitter, their key objective is to cut body fat, and they need intensity more than anybody in order to achieve that end. CrossFit prizes intensity.
Yeah.
Intensity is considered a correlate with results, or it's even like defined, like you get results when you have that intensity.
Mm-hmm.
We got to channel like the barbell. We have to be cycling the barbell quickly, get the heart rate up, get the muscles burning for that athlete. So you have the barbell stimulus for the strength person, the performance-based athlete. You have the barbell stimulus for the physique transformation athlete. You have the barbell stimulus for the person that they just want to come in and move for 45 minutes after work.
Right. Get their workout in, burn it off.
They just want to shake off the cobwebs. They want to get their heart rate up, get a little out of breath. They want to get the endorphin rush of the workout, oxytocin rush of the community, or serotonin rush of the experience, the environment.
Yeah.
They want to get that feel good to shake off all the frustration, aggravation of the day, and then go home. So in all these different scenarios, the barbell would be used entirely differently, depending on what they want.
But I think that's really intriguing. I mean, like you said, G, there, both of you are coming at this with I wouldn't say diverging philosophies, but definitely two different angles at how to think of it. And so, so Shawn, you're coming at it from a programmer's mind of programming and allowing for scaling within that to how would you say, for what would your goal be from every workout, Shawn?
Yeah.
What would my goal? Every workout's going to be different, so it's kind of a hard question to answer. I mean, ultimately, like throughout CrossFit, we're looking at improving all of these metrics, like looking good, feeling good, performing better.
Mm-hmm.
Each workout's going to be tailored more towards one end because, as CrossFitters, like we don't specialize in anything. We're looking at kind of this broad depth of fitness and all capacities. So again, it's going to differ by day. Like, like you said, today was more of a kind of stamina and endurance piece. Yesterday was more of just move, get a lot of volume under your belt. Tomorrow is more like lower volume, just weightlifting, right? Just getting stronger, more explosive through a technical Olympic lift. Again, this is going to be, it's all covered throughout a weekly basis, if not a monthly basis.
Sure.
So just every workout is tailored, kind of to improve all these little different metrics.
And it seems like, and G, tossing this to you then, as the way you're thinking of it is, Shawn is kind of, and if I don't say this the right way, please hear the way I'm saying this. Shawn is thinking of the programming as multiple facets to achieve an overall outcome, whereas it seems like, G, the philosophy you're coming from is this idea of the athlete's target. Shawn is thinking of a programming target, and you're kind of thinking of scaling from the idea of scaling not from capacity, but scaling from the athlete's personal desire. Am I picking that up correctly?
Yeah, and I would be super clear that there's a lot of value to both of these because, especially for a CrossFit population, the people that seem to be drawn to CrossFit, a big part of the reason that they're drawn to this is because they want all the things.
Yeah,
we're greedy as CrossFitters. Like we can't make up our damn minds. Like, do we want to get stronger? Do we want to have better endurance? Do we want to have 8-pack abs? Like, CrossFitters want all of the things. And one of the values to having Shawn as a coach is he's going to write a program that lets me work on something a little bit more on one day, something else a little bit more on the other day.
Yeah.
And the punchline of it all is I'm going to look freaking fantastic. I'm going to get my energy rush from this workout, and I'm going to be strong as shit compared to all of my friends.
Right.
So,
well, don't forget, we also just like to be able to bring up CrossFit in conversation. Like the sooner we can say, well, at CrossFit today, everybody's like, oh God, shut up. And when they're all going to their big macro gyms, Planet Fitnesses of the world. I said it. I'm sorry. Should I not have? So G, real quickly then, let's talk about specifically going back to this appropriate idea of scaling here, specifically for a weightlifting movement. Pick an exercise, pick a weightlifting movement that you'd like to talk about, an appropriate way to maybe scale 3 or 4, maybe 5 levels of that movement.
Okay. I like the idea of the deadlift. Okay. So besides being a super practical exercise, it's not as complex as other ones, easier to grasp for both the newbie and the veteran athlete. It has universal value for becoming stronger, adding muscle, feeling fantastic. But there are so many ways that you can tackle a deadlift. And generally speaking, the majority of CrossFitters will gauge their success with a deadlift by how much they can lift once. It's one of the golden benchmark standards. How strong are you a deadlift? You can scale to achieve that end. You can also scale it to make hamstrings stronger or quads stronger. For example, a sumo deadlift is a bit more quad versus hamstring and glute.
Okay.
A conventional deadlift is a little bit more hamstring and glute. So if you're wanting to have more muscular development in the front of your thigh, you want to steer that teardrop muscle, the VMO, then maybe the sumo deadlift. And then
for those who don't know, will you just tell the difference between the two?
Yeah, so conventional deadlift, your feet are inside of your hands. You have a narrower stance, which puts your hips farther back from the bar, and it changes some of the levers and the physics of it. If you go a sumo deadlift, you have a wider stance with feet outside of your hands. Your hips are closer to the bar. It changes some of the mechanics of it. And world records are set with both, so they're both entirely valid methodologies. You can scale deadlifts if somebody has a very sensitive low back. For example, some people, their back just doesn't feel awesome after they deadlift, even if they deadlift with perfect technique. People who fall into that category should scale a workout laterally from conventional deadlift to sumo deadlift, because the sumo deadlift is less intense. It is less demanding on the low back. The physics of it are such that the torque exerted through the pivot points of the spine is less. So you scale it laterally in order to make it the kind of workout that you can do, you can succeed with, without having any negative consequences after the fact. You might scale it based on what your job is. So some people who have manual labor jobs have to lift from the floor. Their job, say you're at a warehouse for Amazon and you have to move boxes throughout the day.
Yeah.
Turns out that most box lifting from the floor is a sumo deadlift, not a conventional deadlift, because your hands are inside of your feet. And the bigger the object you're lifting, for most people, typically their feet go wider. So if you are trying to get better at your everyday job, or you want to be strong and generally able to move things at home without difficulty, furniture, etc., maybe you're going to bias to a sumo deadlift, and you scale the workout to a sumo deadlift because there's more transferability of the skill, if you know what I mean.
Sure. You heard it here, folks. You heard it here first. If you work for Amazon, work on your sumo deadlifts.
Yeah. Or if you're moving, houses. Yep. So that's a long-winded answer to the question.
No, that's okay.
I hope I answered it. I actually don't know if I answered your question or not.
No. I think that's good. I mean, I think also, again, it goes somewhat of the desired outcome as well, I think. So Shawn, back to you here really quickly, because this one's not as clear for me. I understand the idea of scaling a gymnastics movement based purely on what I can't do, so to speak. I understand the idea of scaling the weightlifting movement, and again, depending on the movement itself, if it's a clean and jerk or whatever. Like today we did shoulder to overhead, and I asked you specifically, I said, hey, is this a strict press? And you go, no, you can do a jerk, you can do a push press, whatever is necessary based on what, the desired outcome. But when it comes to monostructural movements, let's use rowing for an example. Can you even scale that? Is that a scalable thing, or how does that work?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, a lot of it, like from the affiliate side, is just going to depend on, like, you're going to have to adjust a row because there's just only so many rowers. Like if you have a class,
Sure.
At CFE, we've got 7 rowers. Like if we have more than 7 people, like obviously we can't share equipment right now with COVID restrictions and everything.
Right.
So generally speaking, like monostructural is going to be looked at from a time domain standpoint.
Okay.
So generally speaking, like there's kind of rough adjustments we can do. Like today we had a 2,000 meter row to start. Like I don't want someone to be on that for like 13, 14 minutes.
Right.
Like to get the desired stimulus, and generally it's going to be an intensity thing too. Like if you're hitting it with the appropriate intensity, you should be able to finish in 9 minutes or less, which is the cap I applied to it.
Yeah.
Now, generally speaking, like when we're looking at, and generally like monostructural can be adjusted for any other kind of implement. Like longer distances, probably don't want to substitute out for double unders because your calves are going to get rhabdo and you're going to hate yourself tomorrow.
Sure.
But like rowing, biking, running, like generally it's all going to be very similar stimuli. And there's general kind of adaptations we can make. Like a 2,000 meter row is pretty much equivalent to a 1 mile run, just from a time perspective.
Okay.
Which is pretty similar to a 100 calorie assault bike or a 4,000 meter assault bike. Again, just general time. There's going to be fluctuations in there based on strengths and weaknesses.
Sure.
It's a little bit more complex when we start looking at kind of the intention of why the specific machine is used. Right. So like if we're looking at today was like rowing, shoulder to overhead, and burpees, like we're going from a pull to an overhead press to a horizontal press. Okay. So that makes it a lot more challenging. Like the bike is still going to give you a good workout.
Yeah.
But now you're going from horizontal press to vertical press to horizontal press. So it does tend to change some aspects. But generally speaking, it's more of a time domain and fitting the desired intensity level within whatever you're substituting out for. But you can even go to like burpees, have a good place to sub out for rowing. This becomes super important if you are quarantined or, especially like right now, like there's a lot of weirdness with like going out in crowds.
Right.
And not everyone has access to a rower or a bike. So like,
right.
2,000 meter row, again, you're looking about 7 minutes of burpees. That's
a chunk.
Right around 90 to 100, give or
Yeah.
take.
Yeah, that's a chunk. I would like to say that my 2,000 meter row is much faster than my 1 mile run. G, do you have anything you want? Yeah, for right now. Yeah. G, how about you? You add anything to that as far as the monostructural scaling that you'd want to jump in there with?
I think Shawn described it well.
Yeah.
A lot of times the stimulus for the reason for scaling the monostructural piece is purely logistics. Like there's only so many bikes, there's only so many rowers.
Sure.
So that's the usual reason why we do that. But you can also scale it, like you said, based on time domain. And we do that a lot. I would like for everybody to get 8 minutes of intensity on this rower. here are the distances for that. I think something that we can also talk about is scaling for men versus women.
Sure.
Because on the rower, the rower gives more credit, gives more, I don't know, you get more points on the rower if you're taller, longer, and heavier, and that tends to be most men.
Yeah.
So at CFE, we've had a standard of if a guy has X distance or calorie count on the machine, then usually 80 to 85% of that is an equivalent for a female. Because
I've always wondered what the percentage difference was. Now I know.
Yeah, 80 to 85% is about right. And that was actually gleaned through trial and error and testing 4 or 5 years ago. We were testing workouts for a competition that we were hosting, the Fittest Team of the Metro East competition. We timed out how long it took for the men to do a certain distance, how long it took for the women to do 70% of that, 90% of that, and through like the actual testing and assertion, we identified that if I put a man on a rower for 1,000 meters and a woman on there for 800, 850, they get off the rower at the same time. It creates a level playing field.
Sure.
Because the rower is inherently an unlevel playing field.
Sure. Got it.
Interestingly, such adjustments don't typically end up being necessary for running, because a longer stride length can be offset by the fact that they're also, a male is carrying 50 pounds more on their frame than a woman.
Sure.
And I get outgunned by women on running all the time.
It's
all the time.
I'm with you, brother, on that.
She's a little Tasmanian devil. She can outrun me every day of the week.
So one of the things both of you mentioned was the time domain element. And so I want to ask you that question as far as time caps on a workout. And, Shawn, I know when you're programming, I'll see you sometimes there in the gym and you're testing stuff and you're running through things like that. A, how do you typically develop a time cap? And B, are time caps really a suggestion, or can people keep moving after that, et cetera? What, are they a suggestion or a hard line? How would you feel about that?
I said most of the time, like time caps they serve two purposes. Purpose number one, logistics. Like we don't have an unending allotment of time for a class. Right?
Sure.
We can't go to 5 minutes over, 30 minutes over, 2 hours over. So It's a lot of it. Like that's kind of the first way to look at it, is it's to make sure that everything's moving well logistically and we are on time for the next classes coming out. Yeah. And we have time to clean up and all this stuff. The other side to look at, I look at a lot of times, if I test something okay, this took me this long and this is how this felt. Not all the time it works out all that well. I've missed the mark and I'm going to continue to miss the mark on time caps.
Sure.
But it's generally there to give the person an idea on kind of the intensity desired, right? Because the intensity for Fran 21:15.9 of thrusters and pull-ups is going to be 5 to 6 minute cap. That's a very different intensity than Murph, which is, a mile run, 100 pull-ups, 200 push-ups, 300 air squats, and a mile run. I've done it so many times, you would think I would know it off the top.
I was going to say, to watch you get stumped on Murph.
But those are two obviously very, very different workouts.
Yeah.
And another way to look at it is just kind of general safety, depending on the volume, right?
Sure.
If it's Murph, that's probably a good example. If it's taking you over 60 minutes, you're
Sure.
probably not ready for that level of volume, and you're at risk of hurting yourself, right? So kind of all of that kind of goes into itself. There's also the time cap is. So when I'm writing out programming, you have kind of different time domains within CrossFit that we're working on, right? And that kind of ties in, without getting too sciencey, to different energy systems. So a 5-minute workout should have a very distinct feel. A 10-minute workout should have a very distinct feel. 15-minute, 20-minute, kind of all of these different time domains should have very specific intentions and feels to them.
Sure.
And it's just a way to ensure that you don't over you don't overcomplicate it. You don't do more than you're ready for.
Yeah.
Right? 'Cause there's going to be times where, like, as a coach, where I'm not gonna notice that Dallas has too much weight on his bar, and that's just gonna bury him once he gets 1, 2, 3 rounds in.
Sure.
Right? And like, again, we're all human. Like, we do our best, and we know our athletes really, really well. And more times than not, we're gonna catch like, hey, you should go lighter, or hey, you should maybe go a little heavier here. But there are times we're gonna miss that mark, and that's just to ensure that maybe we missed the desired stimulus, but we're going to go ahead and cap that out right there, so you don't just keep beating your head against a wall.
For sure. No, I mean, you personally have capped me before and been like, move on to the next movement. And you know, because you knew I was burning out and hitting the wall with something, and I wasn't going to overcome it.
Look at it from that perspective. Like, sometimes there's just going to be like internal time caps for me as a coach on specific movements too.
Sure.
Right? Like, if it's taking you, again, 10 minutes to row 2,000 meters, I'm going to come by and be like, hey, you did great here. Let's move on to the next piece, so that we're kind of hitting this desired piece. Right?
For sure. G, what do you want to add to that? Any thoughts on the time cap element?
Yeah.
I saw you writing something there, so you were taking a note on something.
Yeah. So some of the things that Shawn was saying kind of sparked some thoughts that I hadn't thought of before. So I think of the time cap. The question is it a suggestion or a hard line? I think there's 5 perspectives you could take on this. First up, from a logistics standpoint, as in, like, I have to finish my workout, clean my equipment, and get out of the way.
Yeah.
So the next person can come in and use the equipment station. It's a hard line. From a respect standpoint, if my coach tells me, hey, you got to stop your workout right now because of whatever reason, for your own damn good, or because we have to clear up for the next the next workout exerciser, right? It's a hard line. As an expectation setter, which Shawn alluded to, for today's workout, I want you done with the rower by 9 minutes. Adjust accordingly. That 9-minute time cap gives you an idea of how to adjust the workout to make it the appropriate one for you.
Yeah.
In which case, that's a pretty good guideline. It's a guideline. If it's open gym, this is perspective 4. If it's an open gym, a time cap is probably a guideline versus a hard line.
Yeah.
Which Shawn writes the workouts with an idea of what is finishable in the time cap in the first place. Generally, I have
nothing is more humiliating than filling out the did not finish. I can tell you.
I can't speak for Shawn on this. I don't know if he ever writes workouts intentionally, like making where they are not finishable. I know that I have done it, but it's a rare day.
Yeah.
Usually, like, if I'm at an open gym, or if somebody is doing the workout that I wrote in an open gym, I consider the time cap to be a guideline, and they can probably go until they finish. And
well, just to insert real fast, G, on that, you did that to me just last week. We were in open gym time. We were both working out and a few other people, and the timer went off, and I was like 12 reps shy, and you said, get on it. And I was like, okay.
Right.
Because at first I was like, oh, time's over. And you said, get on it. And I was like, crap. All right.
So this brings up an important 5th point, which, like, the time cap can be a safety net. The time cap could actually save somebody from themselves, right? Sometimes CrossFitters go too far. Like, in CrossFit, we have a love affair with excess. We have a love affair with the extreme. We love doing, like, workouts that could be described firstly as stupid, like ridiculous, like over the top, right? Like, we love our Murph workout. It's ridiculously over the top. It takes forever to do it, right?
Yeah.
But an intelligently chosen time cap can be a safety net that can stop somebody from doing too much exercise volume. This is important because volume is the hardest variable to recover from. It is the most potent of stimulus. People can recover from intensity faster than volume. They can recover from load faster than volume. But all the cases of rhabdo are pretty much attributable to somebody doing too much exercise of a sort when they were not ready to do that much exercise of a sort.
Sure.
And there are some other things. There's like the eccentric loading components of the exercises, like exercises that have a disproportionate higher level of eccentric loading are more prone to the rhabdomyolysis demon we referenced earlier.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, like what I was saying with this is, if Shawn gives a relative newbie CrossFitter a time cap, it is probably in their own best interest they do exactly what he says, because doing 15 minutes of this versus 8 might be the difference between I can function tomorrow, I can come back and do another great workout tomorrow, or I need 4 days before I can walk downstairs without needing to hold on to the railing with both hands, the death grip. You know what I mean?
We've been there. I know it.
Yeah.
Well, and so keeping time cap in mind, I want to be mindful of our time here. I do have one more question for both of you, and let's just, this can be a little bit more rapid fire. Shawn, you said earlier, you hate to say the phrase, it depends, but I think this might be the answer here. When it comes to avoiding those things that G was just talking about, how do I reach the desired stimulus of a WOD, of a workout? What would you say to that?
Listen to or ask your coach.
All right, G, what, you're nodding. Anything to add to that?
Yep, I completely agree. Do whatever Coach Shawn tells you to do.
Okay. It's pretty good. You are the coach of the year, man. You won multiple awards for coach of the year in our local community. So congratulations on that. So everybody, I think that's really great advice. Obviously, I want to give you guys an opportunity for any closing thoughts that you have. I'll do a quick plug here. We do have plenty of resources, including free ebooks and downloads available for you at the website CrossFitEdwardsville.com. So if you're watching us, if you're listening to this via audio, check out CrossFitEdwardsville.com, and you can get some of those resources, as well as book a class to come in and do a free session as well. So be sure to check that out. I can attest, CrossFit is not nearly as scary as I thought it was. It is challenging, it is difficult, but it's also transformative. It's not scary though. So if you're having any fears about that, feel free to reach out to us, CrossFitEdwardsville.com. And before we go, please, Shawn, any final closing thoughts from you as far as scaling or anything we talked about today that you want to leave people with?
Yeah, I think that when you're looking at kind of a workout, especially if you're in a coached class, don't be afraid to ask what you should do. Like it's one thing to have the autonomy and the ability to kind of adjust within what you think your confines are, but more often than not, your coach is going to know your capacity better than you actually think he does. Like you probably think like, oh, it's hard. How is he going to know like 100 different people's abilities in a specific workout?
Sure.
That's literally what we do all day, every day.
Yeah.
So like whether it's an injury or like the movement itself is complex or it seems super heavy, just ask. Like it's never a hindrance. Like I would rather someone ask me than worry about wasting my time or feeling like a nuisance for having asked. Like it's never that's never the case.
Yeah, 100%. So G, how would you kind of answer that rapid fire question here? How do I reach the desired stimulus of a WOD?
Sure. So in this conversation, I think we've outlined a lot of ways of thinking about scaling, and hopefully we kind of open up people's eyes to the ways that scaling could be used proactively to get more positive stuff out of doing CrossFit in general. That said, like we've also probably outlined that scaling can be quite a complex endeavor with time cap this and switching to a different modality that. So I would say that, to echo what Shawn said, you're not a bother if you ask, hey, how do I scale this workout for me? You're not any trouble to us. We enjoy this. This is what made us coaches in the first place. We enjoy the art and the science of tailoring this exercise experience to you. Sure. Please ask. If you need that guidance, please ask. We're more than happy to share with you what you need to know about each workout. And we can adapt this workout in a million ways to make it just right for you.
That's beautiful. I think that's a great way for us to end it. Again, everybody, CrossFitEdwardsville.com to find out more. You can connect with GSkell there. You can connect with Shawn there, as well as several of the other team members who every coach at CrossFit Edwardsville cares. And I think that's an awesome thing. So G, officially you're the host of this. What do we need to do to close, or is that just it? Do we just say CrossFitEdwardsville.com?
I just want to say thanks to both of you guys, Dallas and Shawn, for hanging out with us, sharing thoughts and perspective, and look forward to see you guys in the next one.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.